My name is Kevin B. Burke. I'm the headmaster of the Real Astrology Academy. Welcome to Class 1 of Astrology and the Human Game, Foundations of Happiness. Today we're going to answer a number of questions. We're going to start by answering the question, why tell astrology stories? We're going to look at how do you tell astrology stories? Then we're going to get to the heart of the matter. How do you tell better astrology stories? Because that's what this class is about. This class will teach you how to tell better astrology stories. To do that, I'll need to explain what the human game is. We'll address why you build a foundation of happiness and what that has to do with telling better astrology stories. And I'll end with an overview of this entire class, this program, so you have a better idea of what's in store. So, the first question, why tell astrology stories? Well, let's start with a story. One of my favorite stories comes from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So this story concerns a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings, and they designed an immense computer called Deep Thought. And the first assignment for Deep Thought is to find the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. After thinking about the problem for 7.5 million years, Deep Thought reveals the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, which is 42. This story illustrates one of the great universal truths. If you ask a silly question, you get a silly answer. The corollary to this is that the quality of the answer depends on who you ask. Instead of asking a computer, they should have asked an astrologer. It doesn't take an astrologer 7.5 million years to find the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. It doesn't take an astrologer 7.5 seconds. To an astrologer, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is obvious. Astrology. Astrology is how human beings have always answered the ultimate questions. Since the dawn of civilization, humans have looked to the night sky and told stories about the movements of the planets to answer questions about life, the universe, and everything. This is the origin of astrology. In the beginning, there was astrology. But before there was astrology, there was story. Astrology evolved from stories, and we use astrology to tell stories. So the way to get better answers from astrology is to tell better astrology stories. Let's start at the beginning and look at how you tell astrology stories, or more specifically, how most astrologers tell astrology stories. Reasonably, most astrologers tell astrology stories by focusing on the astrology. Because they're astrology stories, you would think the astrology is the important part of that. Now, there's lots of different approaches to astrology and different approaches to astrology stories. Modern astrologers broadly tend to look outward. So they're incorporating new symbols in the chart. Asteroids, new planets, hypothetical points, all of these new inventions. That's a focus broadly of modern astrology. Traditional astrologers look inward. They explore long-lost tools from the golden age of astrology. But here's the thing. Modern isn't better or worse than traditional. These are all different approaches to astrology, and astrology is not the point. Because astrology is the language of the story. It's not the story itself. All astrologers, myself included up until I created the human game, focus on expanding your knowledge of astrology, thinking this is how you're going to get the answers, this is how you're going to tell better stories. The curious paradox of this hypothesis is that an expansive, eclectic vocabulary fails to facilitate a significant or a meaningful improvement vis-a-vis the structure, aesthetic qualities, or clarity of the story. In other words, a bigger vocabulary doesn't make a better story. Astrology is important, but story is more important. But why? Why tell astrology stories? Let's look at this from a practical standpoint. Another story. Let's say that you recently ordered a thingamabob from Amazon.com. Now that thingamabob began its story in the thingamabob factory, probably, somewhere in China, because thingamabobs are just too expensive to manufacture in the United States. The thingamabob is shipped from China to the main thingamabob distribution center. From there, it's shipped to a regional Amazon warehouse and then to a local Amazon distribution center in your city, as little as 1 mile away from your home. Your thingamabob has now completed more than 95% of its journey. All that's left is what's known as the last mile delivery, where the thingamabob moves from the local distribution center and ends up on your doorstep. The last mile delivery is the most difficult and the most important step. You won't be happy if your thingamabob is dropped off, somewhere in your neighborhood and you have to go out and look for it. You won't even be happy if your thingamabob is delivered to your neighbor by mistake. All you care about is that the thingamabob that you ordered is delivered directly to you. Astrology works the same way. When a client books an astrology consultation with you, instead of ordering a thingamabob, they're looking for an answer. They've encountered some kind of an obstacle in their personal story, and that's keeping them from feeling happy, and they expect you, the astrologer, to give them an answer they can use. So, in an astrology consultation, a client books a consultation. They're looking for an answer. The answer they're looking for is their thingamabob, in that other story. So, you, the astrologer, analyze their chart. You explore the question. You locate answers in the chart using whatever tools and techniques you prefer to use, and you identify strategies and solutions to help the client. This is 95% of the astrology required for that astrology consultation, and all of it took place before you sat down with the client. You are now ready for the last mile delivery, where you deliver the answer to the client. And you cannot rely on astrology for that last mile delivery because the client doesn't understand astrology. Client doesn't really care about astrology either. The client just wants to be happy. So your job, you have to connect the astrology story to the client's personal story. You have to do that in a language the client can understand. You have to make it relevant to the client. You have to complete that last mile delivery so the client doesn't have to make their own connections. They don't have to bridge any gaps. They don't have to figure out how to interpret what you say. They want an answer that makes sense, that connects what you saw in the chart to what they're dealing with in their life, and they want to be able to use that answer right now so they can overcome the obstacle and move towards happiness. And this is why you need to tell better astrology stories. Because when you tell better astrology stories, you do a much better job with that last mile delivery. Astrology stories are how you connect to the client in a meaningful way. So, how do you tell better astrology stories? Well, again, remember, Astrology is the language you use to tell the story. It's not the story itself. This program is going to focus on the story, not so much the astrology. Now, we need astrology to tell astrology stories, and I'm going to teach and provide you with all of the astrology you need, but it's going to be very basic, very simple, just enough astrology that you can understand the process, that you can see how to use basic, simple astrology to tell better astrology stories. And then when you understand how to tell better astrology stories, you can tell those stories using whatever astrology tools and techniques you would like to use. Because astrology is the language, it's not the story.